Okay, hello and welcome to TTT on Tidy Tea Time. Today we have Pooja, Kiran, Soumya, and me, Deepkanya, talking about
Hello.
personal opinion versus company policy. Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello.
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 So I was just thinking this topic today is actually quite meta because, considering this is a company podcast, this is a conversation brought to you by Tidy, which is a people ops software company. We are all Tidy employees who bring a lot of our personal opinions and a lot of our personal ideas on this social platform that we have created. So it is, you agree, Meta?
Yes,
So,
agree.
are you guys super careful about what you say here on Tidy Tea Time?
I mean, I yeah, 100%. I don't know
Right,
what
but
is wrong to say, but I definitely have that filter in my
if anyone's heard any of the episodes where I am, I don't think there's much
head.
of a filter. Last time there were quite a few comments against what I was saying as well. So, no, I don't think so.
No filter there. Okay. Soumya?
Hmm.
I don't think either. Like not on tidy tea time. No, no filter.
But are you as open about your personal opinion because you think it's safe enough in general to not ruffle too many feathers, or is it about you being confident that even if you said it, it's okay? Like we keep saying, right? This is a safe space for us to kind of say whatever we feel like. And considering our founder and CEO is part of the conversation, there's a certain amount of leeway that we all have. Is that the reason?
Could be that. Could be the fact that I'm also a freelancer here. So
Oh, I have nothing to lose. Is that what it is?
I feel like I might have less to lose.
Okay. Pooja?
I mean, I tend to, especially topics that are new to me and something that I tend to ramble when I don't know what to say. And if I ramble, I might go off topic. And, I that is where I stop myself and I'm like, okay, don't basically just don't make it too personal, I guess. You
Mm. Yeah.
keep things on the surface. Have opinions, of course, but don't um, be careful who you call out and things like that. I would say that's it.
Yeah.
That's filter.
And
Filter.
Kiran? I mean, I'm sure you have certain like guardrails you've put for yourself. Where's the line that you've drawn?
I think, like you said, being the CEO and co founder, it gives me the ability to say a lot more without thinking about repercussions, but personal repercussion. But I think from a brand perspective, I'm always going to be the brand ambassador for the company. And so there are a lot of people who will kind of, or rather, I will interact with a lot of different types of folk across the globe. And so the only filter I would have is at times I would think about how to say the same thing, but more from a thought leadership perspective rather than from a generic conversation perspective.
Mm-hmm. Good. Fair enough. Uh, but that's what today's topic is about, right? Like because we have seen a lot of the internet is a place for opinions across like all kinds of opinions that you see every day. Some are quite controversial, and some have led to many things. Many other events kind of flow out of one tweet or one post or one reel, right? So what happens if that goes against company policy? I think that is the is today we are talking more and more about freedom of speech, about how you should be allowed to open your heart out and say what you want. But then how do you balance that? Have you guys given any thought to the way things are today and how they should be?
I think it's getting increasingly complicated. Let me start from an employer perspective, right? I just shared an article before we went live over here about I think a 13-year-old.
Mm.
No, actually, I shared it with someone else about a 13-year-old who has become a brand ambassador and got a free SUV, luxury SUV, right? Because she's an influencer, and so there was a comment where that individual, or was it someone else, I don't know, basically said, I'm earning so much as an influencer today without having even completed my college. Why do I need to complete college and go into the corporate world? So I think where I'm coming from is, it is easier today to build your brand and build your own sort of revenue stream,
Mm-hmm.
that you don't necessarily think the corporate policy or the corporate world to start with is as important.
Mm.
So as an employer, it becomes really challenging to work in such an environment, because you're constantly kind of battling for the best talent, but then that best talent also requires a huge amount of freedom to express themselves and be who they are across multiple channels. So I think that's where the sort of balance or the conundrum is as an employer, is
Yeah.
how you kind of balance that.
Yeah, and it's a really tough one, right? Because there are so many things, and I think it is most, there are basic things like, of course, companies will put in certain policies in place saying that you should not post anything that's discriminatory, you should not post anything that's racist or sexist, or cyberbullying, for example, is not allowed. We do not condone such kind of posts. But then on the other hand, you have examples that I was looking up online of social media posts that kind of backfired. For example, there's this hospital in the UK where hospital workers were playing a Facebook game called the Lying Down at Work game. It was called, I think, wherein basically you just took pictures of yourself lying down, face down on the floor, arms next to you, in different, wherever, like on the road, it could be on the road, it could be in a corridor, it could be anywhere, right? So this hospital, the hospital staff decided to go and do it in like different places, like the OT and in the emergency ward and different places, and this backfired because the hospital said, sorry, you cannot do that on our time, in our on our property, and all of those guys got fired, I believe. So what then? What, I mean, because that's not discriminatory, it's not harassing anybody. Would you guys agree with what the hospital decided to do?
I think it's about like anything that you put out on social media from with respect to a company that you're working for using the space. It's important to keep that positive, you know, don't, it's about that positivity. Always show your company in good light. And I would imagine maybe this particular hospital must have, something about their reputation it must have shook them possibly in that direction. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I
it,
think maybe if it's from the perspective of the privacy of the patients, if that was probably compromised, I think that might have been a conversation, and firing really made sense in from that perspective. But if it was about our time, this time you shouldn't be doing this kind of a thing where you're not allowed to only work and not engage in any other activities, I think that's something that can be debated over.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on the side of the employees on this one because there were no patients in any of those pictures. They were
mm,
doing something that could have worked well for the hospital because it's all also about humanizing the people who work there. And I think a lot has changed in the way we look at social media as well now, and the way we look at workplaces. That if you go back 20, 30 years, workplaces were sacrosanct, right? You did not mess around. You did not, I mean, you should not be misusing anything. Fun was purely as directed by HR, right? So things have changed quite a bit. Like you said, Kiran, because of talent today, expecting a lot more freedom, a lot more leeway, and a lot more of being allowed to bring them their whole selves, so to speak, to work. Therefore, you being okay with a lot of these quirks or personality things that you do, even if it's within the workplace, as long as it's not harming anyone, or like you said, Samya, it's not a thing about showing patience or revealing any information that should not be in the open space, right?
I
Yeah,
think the sorry.
I think we have a lot of opportunity right now as well, right? I think back 10, 12 years ago when there was no social media, I remember the policy was around media interaction, that there's a PR team and only your PR team is going to talk to the media about anything regarding the organization, right? And that's changed completely. And suddenly this entire big gray zone, right? And I think that even, I don't know if there's a company policy, if it's clear and if it exists, still makes sense. But
Mm.
I think the social media policy is still very blurry. So I think that is also a space where a lot of confusion happens in terms of
Yeah,
should
yeah.
you.
Kiran, you were saying.
Yeah, I think the only kind of element I find surprising about the I don't know if that was the actual statement from the hospital, but what you said was they it was on their time and their dime that the people made these posts, which I think is really stupid, um, because if you're thinking about 5 minutes that it takes at the worst case to take a photo like that, um, I think it's a little outdated, that sort of
Yeah.
policing from an organization perspective. So I totally kind of agree with Pooja and Soumya, where unless it has harmed the brand in some way, there should be no reason why it shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then, of course, there's the other side to it, right? I mean, for example, there's this other story of this kid, not kid, I don't know how old or young he is, but basically, this guy who had some 1.4 million followers, I think, on TikTok, and he worked for a paint company. Okay, and what he did as part of his TikTok uh, repertoire was to mix paint and mix things into paint and take videos of this. His company found out and he got fired because they said he's misusing, again, company property. He's mixing paint and he's thing. Soon after, he got hired by a rival paint company who actually said, "Go ahead and create this content. We'll give you all the material you need." And they, took full advantage of the 1.4 million followers that this guy had. So what a missed opportunity, right? And again, a little bit of thinking that is from 20 years ago, that did not translate well for that company at all. But it is a tough one to kind of thing, right? Because it is a disciplinary thing. Because at the end of the day, he did not really check with whoever it was, uh, authorities to see if he could use company resources to create his personal profile, influencer profile on social media. So what do you do? You, like, rap on the knuckles and say yes, now let's go ahead and do this properly.
As long as it's within those guardrails, I think it's really stupid, right? Because the company, I would imagine, is a multi-million dollar revenue generating paint company, and really taking 5 cans of paint to mix it is not going to really hit their bottom line, or be a real issue from a financial perspective. And so I think it's really, again, bizarre that companies would use things like this to get people out, and throw them out, because, like you said, it's losing the opportunity, right? Because those 1.4 million followers in today's world is way more valuable than 5 paint cans or 15 paint cans or 100 paint cans, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's really bizarre, all of
And
these stories.
short-sighted. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. These are true stories. I mean, these are all stories that I, online. But
Is that Facebook thing that you talked about, where people lie on the floor, is that a current trend or is that something in the past?
there was something in the past.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
was.
I was gonna say that's something we should do when the new office opens on Monday.
Oh yes,
Tell everyone to do that and be a part of the trend.
we
Yeah.
can revive it. We can revive that trend.
Yeah.
Light in different places across the office. Yeah, but so as you said, when you, Kiran, talk about something, you are seen as an ambassador of the company, right? Even you're actually, in all um, uh, any platform, you are a spokesperson for Tidy automatically. To your point, right, Soumya, which you said, normally you have a PR person or you have designated spokespeople. Um, But as an employee, do you automatically become an ambassador of a company, no matter where you are, right? Because at the end of the day, for example, we had that horrible case of a man who urinated on a flight, and he got fired from his job. And this was for behavior on his own time, not as a company representative, but still, he did it. It was really not the right thing to do at all, and he got fired for it. So then, how does that work out then, right? Because you're not wearing a uniform, and you are definitely doing something that you did and it was a mistake. I'm a little confused about that.
I the thing, I mean, I guess the thing about posting anything on social media is that there are so many different perspectives that people can see. Even the guy who did the paint thing, maybe like you may be posting it with a certain positive, good thought in mind, but there are so many thousands of people looking at that post and running their own judgment against it or for it, or who knows what people are thinking. So that's where I think knowing that what you're putting out there is going to be seen by people with their own opinions and their own thoughts of it already gives you like it is. And if you know that you're in a place where if you're famous or if you're an influencer or something, who is it affecting? How am I? I guess you got to do that little bit of thinking in your head. I don't know. It's not that you shouldn't post it, but if you think that it's going to come back to you in some way, maybe you ask before you do it. I don't know. I mean, because
Yeah,
it can still be a very scary place, social media, especially platforms like Twitter and all are like battlegrounds almost. I fear anything to do with Twitter because there's so much opinion on that platform that I just rather refrain from saying anything. But to each person their own, right? Like what works for you might not work for somebody else, and that's okay. That's fine to have to put it out there, but you'll always have two sides, many sides to what you're trying to say.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I
I
think
think
it comes. Go ahead, Samir.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to brand reputation. I think in such instances, sometimes firing feels like an easy way out and not having to deal with what comes with the behavior of that particular employee. And when there's such huge uproar, there's so much going on social media for a brand to actually stand up and say that, okay, we're not firing this employee, but let's go through a proper investigation and all of that. I think an proper investigation should be there, and not like an easy way for a brand to protect itself. Maybe it could backfire, like the example that you said, right? With the pain situation, you could have probably given it a little more thought and put it to a different use altogether.
Yeah, yeah. We have a comment that's come in from Rohan Vyavaharkar. He says we are reps of our organizations at all times, especially in public places, spaces, and airline cabin, Twitter feeds, or even LinkedIn must be considered one, and therefore your actions will be deemed appropriate or otherwise accordingly. Very, very strict. But then to this I will ask, like, a lot of people do put out this statement saying opinions are my own, and I in no way are in no way representative of the company or whatever, right? They put that little disclaimer. Does that really work? Like, does that absolve you of anything that you might say being against company policy, but it's okay?
Legally, no, um, unless there's very clear boundaries. But I think the problem with social media is not even about what happens at that moment. The problem with social media is the permanence. And I know a lot of cases where something that was put up in jest maybe a few years ago
Mm,
have been pulled up in a diligence process, and therefore that person has lost an opportunity because of something that he or she said 3 4 years ago, right? And it was a banter between friends, but even that kind of
yeah,
results in a flag being raised. So I think the problem is fundamentally about that permanence of social media. um, what might seem innocent at that point can still be probably, you know, way more polarizing sometime in the future. And that's, I think, the fundamental problem that people are dealing with and brands are dealing with, because it may seem innocent today, but 4 years from now it might seem very polarizing because the context of the world has changed.
Yeah, yeah. And that is, I mean, that's sad. Sad, but also, I mean, again, maybe it's not sad, but it is something that we all have to figure out. I think that's what it is. Though, there is a New York labor law which basically states that it prohibits adverse employment actions based on lawful off-duty conduct, which basically said, like, if you did anything, anything political, like, for example, fundraising for a political candidate, party, or if you were part of an advocacy group, or you were engaged in, even goes so far as to say recreational activities on your personal time where you might have used consumable products, maybe tobacco, maybe alcohol, whatever. None of those things can be used against you. So that is legally, that's, of course, employees have. But at the end of the day, we do know that, like you said, whatever you tweet and say and pictures you post stay forever. What's stopping anyone from judging you and then making a decision, say, for example, employment, offering you a job in the future? How does that work?
Again, I'll actually kind of say my piece before handing it over to Soumya and Pooja. Is that I think many years ago there was this trend that if you get hired into management positions or product positions, I think it still happens in some places, you would get thrown into a class which is kind of teaching you about how you should talk, how you should kind of present yourself. It's kind of like leadership coaching and presentation, how you should manage presentations and
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of people will need that from a social media perspective, right? And
Mm,
I think it's it's also something that will kind of look out for the person over a period of time, just like the coachings on presentation, how to deliver the best presentation possible as a leader. Now you're talking about how to deliver the best social media profile as a leader and build your own social brand. I think that's something I keep talking about internally as well. It's really important for each one of us to build our social brands today, because it is going to influence a lot of our opportunities in the future. And so I think it has to become more of a science
mm.
and more kind of structured. But I will hand over to Soumya and Pooja now.
Yeah, I think personal branding is gaining so much popularity in itself, trying to kind of, and organizations are also asking their employees to be active on social in that sense. So I think a certain kind of training, right, like Kiran said, makes sense to me as well, so that people are aware, and clarity in your policy. Just let's probably not have a lot of things in the gray zone, right? Maybe that's going to take time, but can organizations not have their policy being so broad that employees can't post anything at all, and not in a way that it's not clear enough? I think that's very important. That clarity in the policy itself is very important, because just because something might offend your management or your company does not mean that it's inappropriate, right? I think that is also something that we need to consider.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you have things like what do you call that? Oh man, what's that company review site? Glassdoor, right? You have
Mm.
Yeah,
Glassdoor where people come in and actually say a lot of things, positive as well as really negative
Anonymous,
things.
some are
Yeah,
very anonymous.
most are anonymous, right? But say really negative things, which is great feedback for the organization if the organization is open enough and willing to kind of pick that up, right? So I think it's a perspective on both sides.
So I
and
have a question there. Sorry. If it's anonymous, it's considered great feedback. But if you know who it's come from, what then?
I think it should still be considered valuable, because at the end of the day, an organization and most enterprises have your surveys that go out, right?
Hmm.
How are you feeling? How are you faring? How are you working with your manager and your teams? And you know what's good and what's bad. Now you're trying to get feedback so that you improve. where that feedback comes from or from who should not matter, right?
Hmm.
Because if someone had a terrible experience in your organization, it's a reality. You need to own up and make the necessary changes for it. It's like people bash apps on the app store, and that's not anonymous, but that's
Yeah.
because you're bashing an app and not necessarily an organization that you worked for. There's a disconnect, so you're very happy putting your name in there and saying, oh, this app sucks and crashes and blah blah blah. But I think the same should be done from an organization perspective, and the organization should be mature enough to accept that and learn from it.
Yeah, I think you were just quoting customer review. I think brands tend to treat customer reviews very differently than they treat employee reviews if they're negative,
Correct.
right? On
Yeah.
Twitter, if there's a negative review that we leave as a customer, we get instant response, we get help, we get everything we want. But that's not how we treat our employees, probably. And I think if we look at it from that perspective,
Yeah. I think that's because employees do have access to the right people within the company who can actually do something about any grievance they might have. I think that is where the difference lies, right? A customer will take to social media because he or she might have tried everything, customer care, info, blah, blah, whatever, and not gotten a response, and then move to social media, taken it public. But an employee going straight to social media is like washing your dirty laundry in public, right? It's considered not fair because you have access, you know.
I would imagine a lot of those reviews from an employee perspective also state that they tried to bring this up internally and it was
Maybe,
just
yeah, possible. Yeah.
I think fundamentally the reason people go on social media to talk about the negatives is when they're frustrated.
Yeah.
It is not the first, it is usually not the first mode for all of us, for most of us. Maybe there are exceptions, and maybe there are many who would go to social media first, but for most people it is not that first venting source.
Yeah.
There is something else that didn't work, which is when you kind of go into social media to say, oh man, I'm done with this, let me now tell the world that this place sucks, right? So I think that is also a very important kind of consideration as an organization, is are
There's
you
a
actually.
Yeah, there's a good example actually to what you just said again. This woman from Yelp, she basically wrote this inflammatory letter to the CEO because she was, really angry about her poor pay rate. And, I think she tweeted about it, and then the CEO tweeted back, and she had quit already, and all of that happened.
Yeah.
And eventually, of course, it went on to Yelp being a mature organization saying that, okay, we fixed all these issues that were brought up, and they fixed their pay rate issue. And she also went on to becoming a very successful entrepreneur, I think it was. So it can work out, where obviously she left because, like you said, she must have brought it up, and she left really angrily because nothing was done. And eventually it took those tweets for the CEO to say, okay, we're doing something about it, right?
Yeah.
But that is, again, stuff about the company itself, where the company does have a lot of say, control, or can do something about what's been said, right? So direct impact. But then there's also stuff that's political, and that kind of goes into that slightly dangerous area. Have any of you stopped yourselves from posting anything political because you were worried about how it would, impact your career, maybe?
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
from
mean,
an
I would
yeah.
stay away from being putting political with anything on social.
Yeah.
This is a scary place to.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
because
think not from the organization's perspective that I would face any repercussion from there, but internet and Twitter, for that matter, is a hell of a place to have political conversations and to get trolled for it. It's really not great for probably my
Mm.
mental health from that perspective.
Yeah.
yeah. Kiran, you?
I mean, first of all, I suck at doing anything social. I think as a spokesperson, that's my Achilles heel. For Tidy, I'm terrible at doing anything social online. So I think that's one of the main gates which prevent me from saying anything. But no, I actually I'm trying to think whether I've had situations where I've wanted to say something and I've stopped myself because it was inappropriate or because it would be considered inappropriate by some people versus the others, right? I don't know. I can't think of a particular moment, but that may also be because I don't really think about posting anything on social media. So,
No,
yeah.
so you are safe, right? The comms team will be like, "Yay!" I mean, no, actually,
No,
bad
not
thing.
really. You guys are always behind my back to post
Exactly.
stuff.
Bad
So,
thing with the comms team. But also safe, right? Because I guess any comms team which has got the responsibility of keeping an eye on anything and everything said on in the social space, in the public domain, they have to keep an eye on that. And any employee saying something that might be considered controversial is a nightmare, right? That you have to deal with. And I think that happens a lot. And that's what kind of got me wondering, right? If you have, say, for example, very political and polarizing issues, for example, in the US, the gun laws, right? You could be absolutely for it, and that's your right. And as a company, you might be absolutely against it, and that's your right too. How does that, how do you balance that?
Hmm.
I wondered about it, and I guess it you know maybe it's about, as long as you can still come back to work and work with each other professionally, keep it professional, keep it civil, and it's a discussion, not an argument. Is there a line like that you can draw?
yeah, like you said, I think if it's extremely polarizing and you have two people in the same organization who have very different opinions, you can even think about ignore the organization itself
Hmm.
for a second. But if there are two people who have extremely, opposite views about whatever the topic may be, gun control, you know, parties, political parties, whatever it may be, I think when it affects work is when the organization should really sit up and figure out what needs to be done. But even then it shouldn't be necessarily, and this I'm just thinking out aloud because obviously we have not faced this situation as yet. So I'm thinking out aloud that maybe that's a moment to kind of see where the two parties could come together, and if there is something that could be worked out or it can't and it's going to hinder work, then you make a decision based on that, right? um, Otherwise, your opinions about politics, about public policy, about gender and sexuality and whatever it may be is very, very personal.
Yeah.
There, as long as it's not affecting the organization, I think it should be a
Yeah.
non-issue from that perspective.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts, Pooja, Soumya?
Mm,
I think for me, because I'm trying to be active on social, I really want to hold on to my right to be able to say things that align with me. And if there's a situation where that if there's any kind of restriction for me from that front, I think I wouldn't be really happy about it. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I think all of that freedom comes with a lot of responsibility towards ourselves as well, right? We
Yeah.
have to be responsible for ourselves as well and what it can lead us into. I think that's what I think.
yeah. Yeah. Taking ownership for sure is a big part of what you post and what you say, and not making things personal. Don't fall. Be clear of what you're going to say, and if at all there's any backlash, be ready to deal with that as well,
Yeah.
because then that's how confident you are about what you're saying. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, it's okay to post on social media, but deal with the consequences, I guess.
And I think that there's, you know, absolutely, spot on. You have to be prepared to face whatever consequences. At the end of the day, you have to behave like a responsible individual online. At the end of the day, it is a public forum. Also, as employees, you have to remember that whatever it is, no matter what disclaimers you put in, you are an extension of the company, you are an unofficial ambassador of the company. So everything you say, can affect the company's brand and image online. So you have to be mindful of that, even if it is outside of working hours and outside of your workplace. And always, I think this is a rule that we should all have for ourselves: is nothing offensive, nothing discriminatory, nothing to hurt or harm anyone at the end of the day. If that's your philosophy, I think you should pretty much be okay. But I think ultimately, if you're ever in doubt about whether to post or not, I would say choose the latter. Don't think. Please slow
Yeah.
down and don't go and post something that could backfire.
Yeah.
And yeah, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Tidy Tea Time. Thank you to everyone for commenting and for joining us today. We'll be back again on Thursday at 4 p.m. with a brand new topic. So do join us then. Bye.
Thank you. Yeah.